Imagine a new kind of investing, a potentially life-changing way to invest that honors biblical principles, the kind of principles that you and I grew up with. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has made biblically responsible investing possible, offering mutual funds and ETFs that are filtered for biblical principles. Don't compromise your values. Invest with Timothy Plan. Ask your financial advisor or call Timothy Plan at 1-800-TIM-PLAN. Again, that's 1-800-846-7526 and discover what it means to be a biblically responsible investor. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing. Mutual funds distributed by Timothy Partners Ltd. and ETFs distributed by Foreside Fund Services LLC. As a paid testimonial, there is no guarantee of future performance and each experience will differ. Hey there, welcome to another edition of the Memo Pod. Glad that you are with us, joining us here in the Heck Hole. And, I was just excited to share this time with you. So, anyway, you got comments about what we talk about today, that'd be awesome. You send it my way, peter@peterheck.com. That is peter@peterheck.com. A couple things that we're going to get into. First of all, for those of you who are free subscribers that are listening to this just as a free thing that goes out, the Memo Pod, each week, I want to dive into, you'll see what we're going to dive into here in just a second. For those of you who are paid subscribers and you're going to stick around, I'm about to say something that those of you who know me and those of you that have been subscribers and that you followed my writing or my work or my teaching or whatever for any period of time, it's probably going to make you fill your drawers. Outside of a better analogy, which just happens to be escaping me right now, that's the one I'm going to use. It's going to, or descriptor, maybe not analogy. That's what it's going to make you do. You're going to have an accident when I say what I'm about to say. And contend to you that Donald Trump is the only Republican that can win in 2024. I know. Yeah. Like you're sitting there right now, you're saying, I've obviously got the wrong podcast. This cannot be the guy that I've listened to. This cannot be the guy that I've seen writing. Has he gone over? Is he now going to put on a red hat? I think that you need to hear me out to understand why I'm saying what I'm saying. I'm actually convinced of it. At this point in time, and anything can change. Certainly people's health, people's incarceration status, all of those things can change and may change. But as we sit here right now, I do not see a scenario where any other Republican besides Donald Trump can win. And right now, I do not see any scenario in which Donald Trump's going to win. So yeah, I would say right now the smart money has to be, if you're a political animal and you're betting on this, it has to be on the Democrats, whoever it is that they choose to run. That's what I want to get into in the second half, as well as how we as Christians should respond to such a situation. Yeah, so it's going to be loaded. The whole second half of this podcast is going to be loaded. And I'm saying that up front so that those of you who are free subscribers, if you want in on this conversation, you want to hear why I'm saying something so outlandish, seemingly outlandish, if you want in to share your thoughts in our comment section and the community that we got there and email me and all of that, you can jump in. $10 a month, you just give it a shot. And if you don't like it, bail. It's fine. I really think that you'll benefit from what we do. And that is not because of me necessarily, but I think it's one of the few places where we're building a community to talk about, as Christians, how should we respond in faithfulness to all of these various things going on. We want to be biblically centered in all of this stuff, while still acknowledging the trappings of earthly power and everything that's going on out there. So that comes up in the second half. Would love to see some of you who are free subscribers jump over, but if not, we still got a conversation to have right now. And I'll start it this way. I have, what's the word I'm looking for? I've always thought, at random times, it'll pop into my mind. And typically it's whenever I see articles about a coming civil war or the coming national divorce and the split that's coming in the country. And I always kind of poo-poo that. I shouldn't use that phrase. I mean, I've already said fill your drawers. I always kind of downplay that. That's what I'm going to go with. But I downplay it because I don't see any geographical or logical way that you could divide up the country. Do I think that we are polarized enough as a people that you would have the political and social right say, yeah, I'm good with a country that doesn't include people on the progressive left? And you could have people on the progressive left that say, yeah, I'm good with a country that doesn't include people on the political right. Yes, I do think we are polarized enough that you could sell people on the idea, enough people on the idea, but there's no good way to do it. And by the way, when it comes to that whole, are you good living away and in a separate country from people that don't believe like you? They may not like it, but the progressive left clearly, statistically, and by surveys and polls and all of that stuff, they are the ones most likely to take that position. The left is consistently now the ones who are more than double where the right is when it comes to, I can't be friends with people who don't believe like me. My whole life, I've heard about how narrow-minded the right is. When I was doing my old radio show, that was one of the things we were trying to put together, catchy slogans and things like that. And we had like a little bumper that went out to commercial or back from commercial. And one of it was he's not narrow-minded, he's just right. I mean, that probably annoyed some people, but we were making a play off of this idea that people on the right are narrow-minded. I've heard it my whole life. And yet, is it not the definition of narrow-mindedness and close-mindedness that you are unwilling to befriend, to date, to be roommates with, and these are all the polls that have come out, or to associate with people that don't share your political views? I mean, the numbers are astronomical on the left now. A giant red flag if they don't share my political views. The numbers are insane. So when I say, could we convince people on the right that it's best if they don't live in the same country as people on the left? Yeah, you probably could, but you undoubtedly could convince people on the progressive left to separate entirely and segregate from. They don't want to have anything to do with people on the political right. So this is where I was going with that, though. Even though I know that people are that polarized, there's no simple way to do it. You go back to the last time our country separated into two different countries, and there was an obvious ideological split. There was obviously a philosophical split. There was obviously a moral split in the country over a host of issues, but the moral issue, of course, being slavery. There were all of those kind of splits, but there was also simultaneously a geographical split. I mean, the Mason-Dixon line was pretty much all you needed to know. If you were below that, you had one view. If you were above that, you had another view. And yes, I'm taking into consideration all of those ideas that were there. The notion of states' rights, if you want to say that was the notion of, is secession treason? And then obviously slavery. All of these issues, there were philosophical, moral implications and splits, but you also had the geographical split. And so it was an easy thing to say, well, here's where the line's going to be, and this is going to be one way, and that's going to be the other. You don't have that now. You have an eclectic array of people. Oh, I know you can separate by red and blue states, but even look at those states. Outside of a handful of them, California. Outside of states like California, you don't have this lopsided 80% of the country. Hawaii would be another. 80% of the country is on the left and 20% is on the right. Most of them, you're looking at 60-40 at most. And most of them, you're a lot closer than that. So who's going to get the state of Illinois Oh, well, that's going to go to the Democrats because they always go to the Democrats. Right, but that's because of Chicago. The rest of the state is very much like Indiana or Iowa. You have far more conservative people there. So you're going to throw the entire state of Illinois and all those people in the rural areas of Illinois, which make up about half of the state population, where are they going to go? And what about the left-leaning people in my state of Indiana? I mean, no, typically left-leaning candidates don't win here, but they consistently carry well over 40% of the vote. Where are they going to go? There's no way to, and even if you did go by blue state, red state, look at how messed up that's going to be. You're going to have a country where Indiana and Ohio, now it seems, are going to be, and Kentucky are going to be in one place, but then all around them, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Minnesota, Illinois, all of those states are going to be blue, along with the Northeast. Then you got the red South, but you got the blue West Coast. There's no way to actually delineate. It's going to be segregated portions, and you're going to say, okay, the Northeast and California, Oregon, and Washington, they're going to be a country. What? You can't do that. So I think it's all an academic exercise. But whenever, this is where I was going with that giant lead-in, whenever those kind of topics come up, it does fascinate me to think, because both sides will say this will be the way it is. It's fascinating to me to think which side is going to say first, this was a really bad idea. I don't really like where my country's going now. Maybe those people on the other side weren't actually lunatics. Maybe they had some legitimate points. Now, if you talk to a progressive, they will say, conservatives, you give them a little bit of time and they won't want to live in the kind of country that they create. But you got a lot of people on the right that will say the same thing about the left. That latter group, the people on the right who say progressives will not want to live in a progressive country, they may feign their admiration of leftist policies now, but if they actually had to live with them, they wouldn't want that. They have the ability to go out and virtue signal and say all these things because they know conservatives are going to push back against it. I would say that those who suggest folks on the left would not be content living under progressive policies in a country if that was what carried the day, I'd say they got a feather in their cap, given by what happened recently. Several of you know that this was the week of 9/11. We remember the anniversary of the 9/11 terror attacks in New York and D.C., and then what became Pennsylvania. But I was reminded by someone, shortly after the horrors of that day, that President Barack Obama's notorious minister, remember Jeremiah Wright, that he goes out not long after 9/11, provocatively claims in a sermon, you remember the phrase? America's chickens have come home to roost. Now, I never knew, did he ever really say, was he talking about foreign policy, I would assume, and I don't know, like our treatment in the Middle East of people and the Palestinians? I don't know if that's what he was talking about. I don't exactly know what chickens Jeremiah Wright was referring to. And I recall that the media was far less interested in asking that question than they were in protecting their political messiah, which obviously was Mr. Obama. So I don't know that we ever got a real answer to the question, what chickens and what does it mean that they're roosting? What are you getting at? Terror attacks, that's the roosting of these chickens? Help us complete the metaphor here, sir. Nobody ever got an answer to that. But that phrase, chickens coming home to roost, I think has been pretty appropriate in application in recent days with regard to a completely unrelated crisis, having nothing to do with 9/11. It's the crisis that's happening on the southern border that I'm referring to. You will recall, I believe, that you had governors like Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who became, at least outwardly, they said, exasperated by the lack of seriousness that our federal government was exhibiting at all of the economic devastation, all of the national security problems, the humanitarian crisis and disaster that was occurring down in Texas. Federal government yawning, not even looking at it, not even paying attention to it. And so what did Governor Abbott, and then Governor DeSantis did this as well in Florida, what did he start to do? They started deportations, but not deporting migrants crossing the border back across the border to Mexico or beyond. No. Governor Abbott said, we're going to begin deporting a small fraction of these migrants, and it is a small fraction, that have been apprehended. We're going to deport them, quote unquote, to blue cities and blue states, meaning Democrat-run areas. And why? Well, many of the mayors and many of the city councils and county councils and governors and legislatures for those states who were far removed from the invasion, I mean, they're sitting there in Vermont writing this kind of stuff. They have enjoyed preening for the cameras, posturing for the cameras, making meaningless gestures like declaring themselves to be a sanctuary city, when they've never had to worry at all about actually having to do it. Oh, maybe an illegal immigrant, one or two, comes into their area at some point in time and they make them essentially a celebrity and all of that. But it's very easy to declare yourself a sanctuary city for migrants coming across the border. Very easy to do that when you aren't anywhere near the border and you aren't going to have to actually take it on. In other words, most on the left have been posturing about their position on sanctuary cities, on the migrant crisis. They've been doing that without any fear that they were going to have to go beyond signaling their virtue. That's as far as it was going to take. Well, Governor Abbott and Governor DeSantis decided to provide these gallant officials in the blue states an opportunity to demonstrate to everyone their nobility. And Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, audaciously predicted that the response from places like New York City and New York City Mayor Eric Adams, that it would be panic and contempt rather than patience and compassion. That's what Abbott said. When they start having to deal with the problem that we deal with every day, they will get mad at the federal government. They're not going to sit there and have the response that they, this patience and compassion, all that. No, they will panic and they will hold in contempt those that are forcing them into this situation. So how's it going? How to this point is it going? Here's Mayor Adams.
The city we knew we're about to lose. And we're all in this together. All of us. Staten Island is saying, send them out to Manhattan. Manhattan is saying, send them out to Queens. Queens is saying, send them out to Brooklyn. No. It's not the game we can play. Open the floor up.
Man. I mean, forgive me for saying so, and I could be wrong here, but that seems a bit xenophobic, doesn't it? Doesn't it sound that way? A little ethnocentric? A bit, dare I say it, racist? You getting those vibes from Mayor Adams? I mean, this isn't a guy, obviously, who respects the humanity of these poor migrants. Listen how he speaks of them. He speaks of them as a problem, not as people, right? Why is Mayor Adams of New York City so angry with Governors DeSantis and Governor Abbott? All those two men did was to provide Mayor Adams an opportunity to be true to his word. He said one thing about this situation, and they said, okay, prove it. And now he's mad at him. And what's with him suggesting that peaceful asylum seekers are going to, quote, destroy New York City? Why the scare tactics, man? Why the fear-mongering? Am I doing this right? Because that's what I've always been told. And surely Mayor Eric Adams of New York City knows that the few thousand that have been sent and have arrived in his city, that is just a drop in the bucket compared to the millions that have overrun smaller Texas border towns and smaller Texas border cities. I would just note that Mayor Adams and his entire leftist brethren, they waxed eloquent at one point in time about being welcoming to all. Why the different tune? Why the different tune? To the point that NBC's former host now of Meet the Press, this is Chuck Todd. Listen to how he teased a segment on the very thing that you just saw Mayor Adams say. This is what I'm talking about.
New York City's growing humanitarian crisis, the shelter system slammed by an influx of migrants. The new calls for federal help. I guess Greg Abbott was right. He said once he got blue cities to deal with this, that they would be very upset at the federal government.
All right. So I'm going to say that Chuck Todd almost got it right. Almost. But Mayor Adams may be upset with the Biden administration, but he's upset with them privately. Publicly, it's all about those mean Republican governors that are making New York City progressives deal with the consequences of progressive policies and politics. How dare you make me live by the values that I profess? How dare you? I noticed that Mayor Adams said in his little talk there, he said, quote, that he doesn't see an end to this. Well, of course, that's absurd. The end to this, talking about the migrant crisis, the end of this happens whenever the federal government decides to do what every other civilized country in the world does: secure its borders. I mean, the moment that we shut down the southern border and we restore order, then the migrant crisis ends. At least on this side of the Rio Grande, it ends. And that doesn't mean that we turn our back on hurting people. It means that we don't pretend that letting them flood across the border and into American cities, carte blanche, that does anything more than create more hurting people. That's what it means. And when I mention hurting people, yes, Mayor Adams, I'm talking about hurting people like overextended New Yorkers who are not prepared for this. My only question is why you think any place is prepared for this when all we need to do is uphold the rule of law. That seems to be the simpler approach. You can let me know your thoughts. Peter@peterheck.com. That is Peter@peterheck.com. Would love to hear from you on that. Would love to know what your take is on a national split and all of that, and if you think that I'm right or wrong in my assessment of its infeasibility. We'll put it that way. Okay, I want to get the break in so that we can, we'll have to leave our free subscribers behind, unless, of course, you click and just go ahead and give us a shot for a month or two. But the rest of you that are sticking on to the next segment, I think it's really going to surprise you to hear me say that Donald Trump is the only Republican that can win in 2024. I get why you're surprised. If you know me, and those of you who are staying on as paid subscribers, you do know me, I can definitely see why you're a little confused. So stick around, I'll explain myself, and then let you take your best shot at me. We'll do that after the break.
The Memo with Peter Heck.
Please patronize and thank all the sponsors of the Heck podcast, including McGonigal's Buick GMC, Terrell's Auto Service, Norris Insurance, Stevens Machine, Creative Financial Center, Indiana Right to Life, Tri-Green Tractor, the Indiana Family Institute, Hartman Family Farms, Liberty Financial Group, the Wyman Group, and J. Watson Creations.